I was gone for 2 days. That's it, 2 days. I came back expecting silence, maybe the hum of bees near my trees. Instead, I heard music, laughter, champagne corks. I stepped out of my truck and froze. There were chairs on my lawn, dozens of white folding ones. A flower arch, people in pastel dresses. And in the middle of it all, Karen. Directing traffic like she was hosting the Oscars. Except this wasn't her land. This was my garden, my home, my property. I walked up slow, thinking maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe they were in the wrong place. But then I saw the sign. Welcome to Emily and Jake's wedding. I didn't know an Emily. I sure as hell didn't invite Jake. And Karen? She saw me, gave a tight smile, and said, "Oh, you're back early." Back early? Like I was crashing her event? That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. Karen planned this, sold the space, lied to everyone, and expected I'd just stay quiet. I looked at her. I looked at the alpaca pen behind me. She had no idea what was coming. I noticed the music before I even turned down my driveway. It was faint at first, just a steady beat, like someone testing speakers. Then came the laughter, cheers, clinking glasses. My truck rolled to a stop as I blinked at the scene ahead of me. My driveway, normally lined with nothing but gravel and grass, was filled with parked cars, fancy ones, SUVs, a limo. I opened the door slowly, stepping out like I might wake up from a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was a full-blown event. I walked around the side of my house and froze. There were people, dozens of them, wandering around my backyard, tables draped in white linen, a buffet being set up under a rented tent. A man in a tux stood next to a 3-tier cake. There were candles, centerpieces, bridesmaids. My lawn had been turned into a wedding venue. I didn't move. My mind couldn't catch up. 2 flower girls skipped past me, giggling. A caterer walked by holding a tray of champagne flutes and gave me a polite nod, like I belonged there, like I was part of it. I wasn't. This was my land, my garden, my property. And none of these people had any business being here. Someone nearby shouted, "Hey!" DJ says we're starting the playlist in 10. A cheer went up. I took a deep breath, heart hammering, and started walking toward the tent. That's when I saw the arch. Wooden, hand-carved, draped in ivy and roses, and right in front of it stood a photographer, lining up a shot. The view, perfectly framed to feature the orchard behind my house. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't some accidental gathering. This wasn't a wrong address. This had been planned. The people weren't confused. They were comfortable, like they were supposed to be here, which meant someone told them they were. I stepped over an extension cord, heading straight for the nearest vendor. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Who set all this up?" The guy looked up from arranging hors d'oeuvres. "Karen did. Said it was all cleared with the property owner." I blinked. Karen. Of course, HOA Karen. She'd finally lost her mind. And now she was throwing a wedding. On my land. With strangers. Without a word to me. I stared out at the sea of unfamiliar faces laughing and sipping drinks on my private property. And for a moment, I actually laughed. Because she thought she'd get away with it. She had no idea what she'd just started. I walked deeper into the chaos, scanning every face. No one looked familiar, not a single neighbor, not one person I'd ever seen near my property. And yet, they were all here, comfortable, dressed up, sipping bubbly under twinkle lights that were strung across my trees. I grabbed the arm of a guy adjusting the lighting near the arch. "Hey, who hired you?" He looked surprised. Karen. She said she was the event coordinator." "Did she tell you who owns this land?" He blinked. Didn't really come up. Right. I moved on. Next was the florist. "Who approved the setup?" "Karen did," she said, barely looking up. "She said the venue was private, but secured." Secured, as in stolen. I spotted a group of bridesmaids chatting near a garden path, my garden path, which I had built with my own hands last summer. They looked so at ease, like they were at a high-end vineyard, not trespassing on someone's actual backyard. I approached the one holding a clipboard. "Hi, I need to ask you something." She smiled brightly. "Oh, are you with catering?" My eye twitched. "Number, I live here. This is my land." Her smile faltered. "What?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "I'm the owner of this property," I said clearly, watching her face fall. "No one asked me for permission. Not Karen, not anyone." She stood there like a deer in headlights, then quickly turned and walked away. That was the moment it really hit me. They all knew. Not everyone, maybe. Not the guests. But the staff? The planners? They had some sense something was off. You could feel it in the way they avoided eye contact, the way they stiffened when I spoke. Like deep down, they all knew this wasn't legit. They were just hoping it wouldn't become a problem. Well, it just became a problem. I marched toward the buffet where a man in a white shirt and black apron was carving roast beef. "Who paid you?" I asked. "Karen," he said, "all through Venmo. She told us not to contact the venue directly because you were hard to reach." I laughed, one of those sharp, joyless laughs. Hard to reach? I lived here. I had never once spoken to Karen about a wedding. She knew damn well I wouldn't have agreed. And now here they all were, eating, drinking, celebrating, on my property, without permission. Karen had gone from petty HOA queen to full-blown scammer. And while everyone was pretending not to see me, I was already planning exactly how this day was going to end. Spoiler, there would be no happily ever after for Karen. I spotted her near the archway, clipboard in hand, Bluetooth headset clipped to her ear, talking fast and pacing like she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. That had to be the planner. She was directing someone to adjust the flower placement when I walked up. "Excuse me," I said. She glanced at me, distracted. "One sec, I just need these chairs turned slightly. Sunlight's hitting the aisle. Weird." "Excuse me," I repeated, louder this time. She finally looked up. "Can I help you? Are you one of the servers?" "No," I said, folding my arms. "I'm the owner of this property." She blinked. The smile froze on her face. I'm sorry, what?" "This is my land," I said. "I live here. No one asked me for permission to host a wedding here." She just stood there, blinking rapidly like her brain was rebooting. "But," Karen said. "Yeah," I cut in. "Karen says a lot of things." She fumbled with her clipboard. "She booked the venue months ago, sent me photos, layout dimensions, everything. I just assumed—" "Well, you assumed wrong." She told me this was her family's private retreat, said it was technically part of the HOA, so paperwork wasn't necessary." I stared at her. "Does this look like an HOA clubhouse?" She looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. The chickens in the coop, the muddy boots by the back door, the alpacas grazing in the far field. "No," she whispered. "Oh, no." "Yeah. Oh, no is right." She started flipping through papers like proof might materialize and save her. "This is bad. This is really bad. I have vendors arriving in waves. The guests are already here. We paid a deposit, well, Karen did. And I have a whole schedule that—" "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "You were scammed. This wasn't your fault, but you're trespassing. And right now, everyone else is too." She looked like she might cry. "What do I do?" "Start by telling the couple." She swallowed hard. "They're on their way now." Of course they were. Perfect timing. And Karen? Running around somewhere, probably drinking champagne. Figures. I took a step back and watched the planner's face crumble. She wasn't evil, just caught in the crossfire of Karen's delusions. Still, I didn't feel bad. Not yet. Because this mess was about to get way worse, and the bride hadn't even arrived. I didn't have to look far to find her. Karen always made an entrance. There she was, strutting across my lawn in heels far too high for grass, wearing some kind of pastel blazer over a flowy floral dress that screamed, "Look at me." Her platinum blonde hair was in one of those tight, aggressive buns that somehow made her look even more smug. She held a champagne flute in one hand and her phone in the other, barking orders between sips. I stepped directly into her path. She saw me, smiled like we were old friends, and said, "Oh, you're back early." That again. Like I was the one crashing her event. I didn't respond, just stared. She took another sip and waved vaguely at the chaos behind her. "Isn't it beautiful? I told them your property had the perfect garden vibe, so rustic." "You told who?" "The bride's family. I've been planning this for weeks." I blinked. "On my land." She gave an airy laugh, the kind people do when they want you to feel silly. "Oh, don't be so uptight. It's just one afternoon." "One illegal afternoon." Karen rolled her eyes. "Please, it's not like you were using the space. You've got all this land and no events. It's a waste, really." My jaw tightened. "This is trespassing." She took another sip. "It's community collaboration." "No," I said. "It's theft." She looked at me over her glass, that fake smile plastered to her face. "Relax. You're not going to ruin someone's wedding over a little miscommunication, are you?" "Miscommunication?" I stepped closer. "You told people this was your property." She gave a small shrug. "Well, I told them it was available. Same thing." I could feel my blood pressure spiking. "And the money?" I asked. "Did you pocket that too?" Karen tilted her head, the smile slipping just for a second. "Let's not be dramatic. You sold my land as a wedding venue." She waved a dismissive hand. "Honestly, you're being so negative. This is a beautiful day, a couple in love. What kind of person tries to ruin that?" "You mean the kind of person who hosts a fake wedding on stolen land?" Karen leaned in slightly, dropping her voice. "Look, you can either enjoy the party or stay out of the way. But if you make a scene, it'll be on you, not me." I didn't answer, just stared at her. She turned on her heel and walked away, humming. Like she'd won. Like I wasn't going to do anything about it. She had no idea how wrong she was. The sound of a car door shutting snapped me out of my fury. I turned just in time to see a sleek white SUV pulling up near the archway. Out stepped the bride, young, glowing, clutching her dress in a garment bag, with her maid of honor fussing over her hair. She looked like a Pinterest board come to life. She scanned the setup and gasped, "Oh my God, it's perfect!" Another car door slammed. The groom stepped out, adjusting his tie and smiling nervously. He looked around like a man seeing his dream come true. I swallowed hard. This was the worst part. The planner rushed over to greet them, her face pale, her movements stiff. She was clearly trying to keep it together. I followed, slower, watching. The bride turned to me with a beaming smile. "Hi, are you the property owner?" I nodded. "I am." "Thank you so much for letting us use your beautiful land," she said, eyes full of gratitude. "Karen said you were happy to help but didn't want to be involved in the planning." I didn't answer right away. Her smile flickered. "Wait, is everything okay?" I glanced at the planner. She looked like she wanted to melt into the grass. "I think we need to talk," I said gently. "Privately." The bride blinked. "Why?" I took a breath. "Because Karen never asked me. I didn't agree to this. I didn't even know about it until I got home an hour ago." The silence was instant and sharp. The groom stepped forward. "Sorry, what?" "This is my land," I said. "Karen didn't rent it. She never spoke to me. As far as I'm concerned, this entire wedding is happening without permission." The bride stared at me, stunned. "But we paid her. We gave her $10,000. I winced. "I'm sorry." The groom's face darkened. "Are you telling me this isn't a real venue?" "It's a real property," I said, "but it's not hers to rent." The bride's hands started to shake. No, she wouldn't do that. She said everything was booked. She showed us pictures. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, pictures of my garden." Tears welled up in the bride's eyes. "We invited everyone. They're all here. Our parents, our friends. We planned for months." "I know," I said quietly. "I'm not blaming you. You didn't know." The groom looked at the planner. "Did you know?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "I swear, I thought it was all legit." The bride backed away like the whole setup was suddenly radioactive. That's when Karen reappeared, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Oh, good, you made it," she chirped, oblivious. And just like that, everything exploded. I'd had enough. I stepped forward, right between the bride and Karen, and raised my voice so everyone could hear. "This wedding is happening on private property," I said clearly, "and none of you have permission to be here." Heads turned, conversations stopped. A server froze mid-pour. Karen narrowed her eyes. "Don't start with your theatrics." "This isn't theatrics," I snapped. "It's trespassing." The bride looked like she might faint. The groom was already pulling out his phone. Karen rolled her eyes and turned to the crowd, raising her voice like she was announcing the cake cutting. "Everyone, please ignore the outburst. He's just confused, a little overwhelmed." "Confused?" She really just said that. I laughed, loud. "No, I'm not confused. I'm the one who pays taxes on this land. I mow this lawn, I feed the animals, and you," I pointed at her, "are throwing a wedding here like it's your personal venue." Karen's smile froze. Murmurs rippled through the guests. The planner stepped back, clearly trying to disappear again. Karen straightened her blazer like she was addressing a courtroom. "Let's all take a breath. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." "Oh, there is," I said. "You lied. You forged access. You took money from these people and sold them a fantasy on stolen land." A gasp came from someone in the back. Karen scoffed, stepping closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You really want to ruin this day? You think yelling is going to make you the good guy?" "I'm not yelling," I said. "I'm making it clear. This stops now. Everyone off my land." The bride sobbed behind me. The groom cursed under his breath. And Karen? She smiled, tight and fake. "You always do this," she hissed. "You act like the victim, like you're so mistreated. But this is a community. We share. We help. You just hoard your land like it's sacred." "It is sacred," I said, "because it's mine." Karen threw her hands up dramatically. "You see? He doesn't care about love, about family. He just wants control. He's always been like this." People were watching now, whispering. She looked around, desperate to spin it. "Do you all want to see this day ruined because someone refuses to compromise?" "No one's compromising," I said coldly. "You scammed this couple. You lied to everyone here. You don't get to play the victim." Karen sneered. "What are you going to do? Call the cops? Kick out a bride?" I smiled. "Number, I've got something better." And I turned and walked away. Because if Karen thought this was over, she clearly didn't know what was waiting behind that gate. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just walked. Calm, controlled. Straight across the yard, past the wedding arch, past the folding chairs, past the confused guests clutching glasses of Prosecco and little paper fans. Behind me, I heard Karen still talking, still trying to convince the crowd that this was no big deal, that I was the problem, that things would sort themselves out. But I wasn't listening anymore. I had something better than shouting. I had alpacas. My boots crunched over the gravel path as I made my way toward the far end of the property. The music faded behind me, the breeze picked up, and just beyond the small wooden gate stood 4 fuzzy heads: Daisy, Pepper, Biscuit, and Tank, the biggest of them all. They were already watching me, ears perked, curious, eager. Tank let out a soft snort and stepped forward. He always knew when something was about to happen. He had a 6th sense for trouble. I reached the fence, unlatched the gate, and paused. I looked back once. From this distance I could see the whole setup, the tent, the arch, the tables with neatly folded napkins. Guests were still seated, some standing now, all clearly sensing something was off, but not sure what to do about it. They would know soon enough. I opened the gate. The alpacas hesitated for half a second, then trotted forward as one, like little woolly soldiers on a mission. They didn't stampede, not yet. They just moved with purpose. I followed slowly behind them, hands in my pockets. It was a long walk back up the hill to the party. I wanted them to feel it, the tension rising, the guests murmuring, the groom starting to argue with Karen. I wanted everyone to notice the animals before the chaos began. Daisy stopped to sniff a tablecloth. Biscuit found a balloon and gave it a curious nibble, and then Tank saw the cake. Everything else disappeared. The massive white and gold cake stood tall on a display table. Tank locked eyes with it, like it had insulted his ancestors. He picked up speed. Karen's voice finally cracked through the air. "Why are there animals? Wait! What is that?" Too late. Tank broke into a gallop. Guests screamed. A chair toppled. Someone dropped a champagne glass. I kept walking slowly, deliberately, through the rising chaos. Karen spun around, eyes wild, just in time to see 4 alpacas storm the buffet like it was an open pasture. Her jaw dropped. "You absolute psychopath." I stopped, turned, and smiled. "No, Karen, I'm the property owner." And the gate had been opened. The moment the alpacas hit the main lawn, all hell broke loose. Tank reached the cake first. He didn't hesitate. He went straight for the top tier with the little bride and groom figurines and took a giant, wet bite. Frosting smeared across his nose. A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by someone shrieking, "Is that a llama?" Nope. Worse. Daisy darted between rows of chairs, startling guests as she weaved through the crowd like she was late to a meeting. A woman in heels tripped trying to get out of the way and landed squarely in a bucket of flower petals. Pepper jumped onto the edge of the buffet table, plunged her entire face into a fruit tray. Grapes flew like confetti. Someone yelled, "Do something!" But no one moved. And Biscuit, sweet, tiny Biscuit, found a champagne tower. You ever seen an alpaca kick a pyramid of champagne glasses? Now I have. It fell in glorious, slow motion, glass shattering, bubbly spraying. The best man dove for cover with a plate of shrimp in his hand. Meanwhile, the DJ was panicking. He tried to cover his speakers with a jacket, but Daisy had already decided the power cords were edible. The music warped into a high-pitched hum before cutting out entirely. Silence, brief, stunned, horrifying silence, fell over the wedding. Then the screaming started. Guests scrambled like they were fleeing a wildfire, clutching handbags, dodging hooves, spilling drinks. One guy launched himself over a folding table like he was in an action movie. Karen stood at the center of it all, frozen in place, mouth open, eyes wild. Tank was now chewing the plastic cake stand with impressive enthusiasm, frosting dripping from his chin. "This is outrageous!" Karen screeched, spinning toward me. "You've ruined everything." I didn't move. "No, Karen, you ruined everything when you lied. This is just justice." The bride was sitting on a hay bale, hands in her hair, her perfect curls now tangled and full of flower bits. The groom stood beside her, watching Tank devour what was left of the cake, with the expression of a man whose day had gone so far off the rails that he'd stopped fighting it. Someone shouted, "Why are they fluffy?" while Biscuit trotted off with someone's veil in his mouth like a trophy. Karen tried to grab Pepper by the harness. Bad idea. Pepper reared back and sneezed directly in her face. I laughed. Out loud. Because for the first time all day, I felt genuinely, deeply satisfied. And we weren't even done yet. Tank was still working on the cake, but it was slow going. He'd eaten most of the top and was now chewing the fondant roses like they personally offended him. A small crowd had gathered at a distance, guests frozen in horror, filming with their phones, unsure whether to intervene or run. And then it happened. Tank paused, made a strange throat sound, and with no warning at all, projectile vomited across what was left of the cake. It was majestic, disgusting, undeniably final. A shriek erupted from the mother of the bride. "Oh my God!" Someone gagged. Someone else clapped. No one knew what to do. Karen stormed forward, heels digging into the grass. "Stop this madness! You, get these filthy beasts out of here!" Before I could respond, Daisy leapt onto the champagne table, literally jumped, like some majestic fluffy gymnast. Flutes toppled, bottles rolled. One popped open and sprayed her in the face. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, drenched in bubbly, blinking, like royalty bathing in Perrier-Jouet. Guests screamed. Again. A groomsman slipped on spilled champagne and skidded straight into the buffet, knocking over an entire tray of mini quiches. Pepper darted in behind him and immediately began hoovering them up. The DJ gave up completely, abandoning his gear and sprinting toward the parking lot with a goat-chewed cable in hand. Karen turned to me, her face red and blotchy. "You psychopath! You lunatic! You've destroyed the most important day of their lives." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the wedding you illegally threw on land you don't own?" The bride, now sitting on an overturned chair, mascara streaking down her face, looked up and said quietly, "Is this real life?" The groom nodded solemnly. "I think so." Biscuit trotted past them, wearing someone's flower crown like he'd been crowned king of the ruins. Karen's voice rose another octave. "You're going to pay for this. You'll be sued for emotional damage, and—" A cork popped somewhere near her head. She ducked. "Get me a lawyer," she yelled to no one in particular. "Maybe start with getting off my land," I said calmly. A group of elderly guests huddled under the dessert table like it was a bomb shelter, shielding themselves from flying eclairs. Tank, his job complete, sauntered off toward the orchard, proud and full, and completely unbothered by the chaos behind him. And as I looked around at the splattered cake, the foamy champagne puddles, the shrieking guests, and the alpaca parade, I thought, yeah, this went exactly how it needed to. The flashing red and blue lights hit the trees first. Then came the siren, short, sharp, and silencing. Even the alpacas stopped moving for a second. A patrol car pulled up right onto the edge of my property, tires crunching over gravel and shattered hors d'oeuvres. 2 officers stepped out, surveying the battlefield. Tipped tables, frosting footprints, crying bridesmaids, and 1 alpaca chewing what looked like a silk napkin. One officer rubbed his temples immediately. "All right," he muttered. "What the hell is this?" Karen was already charging toward them, arms flailing, pointing at me like I'd set fire to a school bus. "Officer, arrest him! He unleashed wild animals. He assaulted a wedding. Look at this destruction." The younger cop raised a brow. "You're saying he brought livestock to crash a wedding?" "Yes," she barked, "and he's not even supposed to be here." That's when I stepped forward, slow and calm, a man with nothing to hide. I pulled a folder from under my arm and handed it to the second officer. "Deed to the property," I said. "I own every square foot you're standing on, including the part with the ruined cake." The officer flipped through it, nodded once. "It's legit," Karen scoffed. "He's lying. This is HOA land." I turned to her. "Karen, I'm not part of your HOA. I've never been part of it. My land was grandfathered out before your little fiefdom even existed." The older cop turned to her. "Ma'am, do you have a rental agreement? A contract? Anything proving you had permission to host an event here?" Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then fumbled in her purse like she might find a miracle between her sunglasses and lip balm. I coordinated this for the bride. I didn't think we needed paperwork. It was verbal." The younger officer raised a brow. "Verbal permission from someone who isn't the owner?" She straightened. "I thought he would be fine with it." I crossed my arms. I wasn't. Silence. The bride stepped forward then, voice shaky. "We paid her $10,000. She said it was a private venue she had access to." The older officer sighed. "Okay, now we're talking fraud." Karen spun toward him, eyes wide. "Wait. No, it's a misunderstanding. I was just trying to help." "By lying to them? And setting up a commercial event on land you don't own?" She started backing up. "This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president." The cop shrugged. "Well, you're also under investigation now." The planner stepped in quietly, holding a receipt. She paid me through a personal PayPal account. Nothing about a venue contract. Karen's face drained of color. And finally, she realized she was screwed. The scene should have calmed down once the police took control, but it didn't. Because just when you think a day can't get wilder, Enter the HOA board. A cluster of well-dressed, stiff-backed residents showed up in matching polos with tiny HOA badges clipped to their belts like they were on a neighborhood crime patrol. Leading them was Linda, HOA vice president, Karen's longtime rival. Linda had that "I've been waiting for this moment my whole life" energy. She strolled up like she was walking a red carpet through the wreckage, pausing to look at the alpacas, the ruined cake, the broken glass. "Well," she said, "isn't this interesting?" Karen looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Linda, what are you doing here?" "We got a tip," Linda said coolly, pulling out a manila folder like it was a weapon. "Several, actually. Turns out people talk when you steal $10,000. Karen's face twitched. "That's not what happened." "Oh?" Linda handed a printout to the police officer. "Because this shows you transferred funds from the HOA community account into your personal one last month. Same amount the couple paid." Karen lunged forward. "That was a reimbursement for supplies." Linda didn't blink. "Supplies for a wedding you didn't have permission to throw? On land the HOA doesn't own?" Karen tried to laugh. It came out cracked and weird. "This is political. You've always wanted my position." Linda smiled. "Not anymore. I don't need to want it. Because we just voted, 30 minutes ago, emergency meeting." She turned to the officers and added, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Karen's been officially removed as president of the HOA." The applause started slow from somewhere near the collapsed dessert table. Then more guests joined in. A few vendors, one of the groomsmen. Even Tank let out a proud little grunt. Karen spun around desperate. "You can't do this to me. I am the HOA." "Not anymore," Linda said. "And once the board finishes our audit, I have a feeling you'll be a lot more than unemployed." The officer holding the file looked up. "Looks like embezzlement, fraud, trespassing." "You might want to sit down, ma'am." Karen didn't sit. She exploded. Screaming, wailing, full meltdown. "This is a witch hunt. He set me up. He let the animals loose. He ruined everything." I raised my hand slightly. "Technically, they let themselves loose. I just opened the gate." Linda snorted. The officers weren't laughing. Karen, red-faced and shaking, was finally led away from the scene, ranting, cursing, heels sinking into the grass like the lawn itself had turned on her. And just like that, the queen of the HOA was dethroned. In front of her entire kingdom, the dust had finally started to settle, literally. Bits of frosting, flower petals, and hay drifted across the lawn like confetti from a very weird parade. Karen was gone. The guests, once panicked and horrified, were now just stunned. Some sat quietly with half-full glasses. A few were still filming, probably already uploading everything online. The alpacas, blissfully unaware of their internet fame, were calmly grazing near the orchard, as if they hadn't just wrecked a $10,000 wedding. I leaned against the porch railing, taking it all in. That's when I heard soft footsteps behind me. It was the bride. Her makeup was smeared, her veil crooked, her bouquet nowhere in sight, but she was smiling, kind of, carefully. "Hey," she said quietly. I nodded. "Hey." She looked out over the lawn. "So, wild day, huh?" "Definitely not the wedding you planned." "Nope." She let out a breathy laugh, the kind people make when they're not sure if they're about to cry or scream. "But it's ours. Now, anyway." The groom joined her, arm around her waist. He looked exhausted but calm. "We were thinking," he began, "if it's not too much to ask." "Go for it," I said. "Could we still get married here? I mean, the mess is kind of perfect now." I blinked. "You're serious?" The bride nodded. "We've already cried. Our families are still here. The cake's dead, the champagne's warm, and one of your alpacas ate my shoes, but we're still in love. And honestly, it'd be a hell of a story." I couldn't help but grin. "All right, let's do it. But I'm not wrangling Tank again if he crashes the vows." "No promises," the groom said. The guests who stuck around helped reset the chairs. Someone found a Bluetooth speaker that still worked. A makeshift aisle was cleared, lined with potted plants from my back porch. The mother of the bride dabbed at her eyes and gave a thumbs up like she'd just survived a tornado and decided to decorate it. Then, as the sun dipped low and cast everything in gold, the music played. The bride walked down the aisle barefoot, beaming. The alpacas watched from a distance like fluffy witnesses to chaos and healing. And right there, on the land Karen tried to steal, in the middle of a day that went completely off script, the couple said, "I do." People laughed, cried, clapped. Someone popped a bottle. Tank sneezed dramatically. And it wasn't the wedding anyone expected. It was better. It was real. It was unforgettable.